So we're going to make multiple bands. I am trying to do this while it's super noisy because it was deathly quiet before I started. And now that I'm actually filming, it's noisy, of course. We're going to make 3 different types of scrunchies. We're going to have a band. You're going to have to make 3 of these, one for each type. It's 15.5 by 2.5 inches. Bow number 1, which is going to be a flat bow, is 10 by 3.5 inches. And then you need a wrapping band of 6.5 by 2 inches band. You can make the 2 inches a little bit wider if you want for ease of everting or making right side out. Bow number 2 is going to be a stand-up band, and that's going to be 10.5 inches by 6.5 by 2 inches band. So bow number 2 is actually going to look like it's going to look like this. It's going to stand up. And then we're going to make a fancy cherry blossom or sakura flower. And you're going to need this, which is 1.5 by 1.5, 5 of these squares, and then 1 roughly circular 1-inch felt. You're going to take your band. This is, of course, for 1/4 inch or 1/2 inch thick, wide elastic. Oh, I forgot to mention elastic too, just enough to go around your wrist. So you can put it on your wrist and hold it like a scrunchie, of course. So we're going to fold it in half, and here's my trick. And it's not completely foolproof because I just had to refilm all this. You take bias tape or ribbon that's narrower, and you stitch it to the right side on the inside. So I used to do it with basting stitches, so it's easy to take out. But the problem is for 2 of these, I was everting it, and the entire ribbon ripped off. And now I'm stuck with casing that's only half everted. And these are quite narrow. So forward and backward stitch, and then just use the seam ripper when you're done. Pretend that I stitched this securely to this end and not toward the end over here where it can fray. And I hope this is getting recorded. Flip it over, and then you want to stitch, after you've stitched the ribbon, down this way as normal. You will encase the ribbon and it will stick out the end like so. I've got one that's already done. The ribbon sticking out. I have it securely, I hope, attached to the middle. You're going to gently hold the sewn end and flip it over, and you might need to give it a little encouragement by pulling some of the folds, and then you can start making a little circle with your hand and pushing it through. This is a very narrow thing to move over, but I'm not particularly attracted to the scrunchies that are super big. So this is going to be more practical and probably more fashionable later when the scrunchie craze is over. So you can see how it's pulled in now. This is when you can just start pulling. Notice you can, of course, use a string through a safety pin. So here I'm pulling it out, and then eventually, yes, voila, it's done. So now I have to remove this. So I have my seam ripper, which I finally found. I have little children and they run off, and I am so sad. They run off with it. They don't run off. And just seam rip it out, and then just pull this little bit out. It saves your hands so much time. I don't know about you, but everting or making right side out casing is horrible for me. Okay. So I already did this one. I've got to take it out. This is for the strap. This is when you might want to press it if you're finicky. Make sure the seam is on the bottom. So this is actually the part that's going to wrap up. So the key to making this nice is you can choose to tuck this in and then hand stitch or stitch on the machine if it won't get caught by tucking this little bit, the raw sides in, and then sewing it. Try to make it a little straighter than I have. Once again, I'm kind of a messy sewer, but you know what? I get it done. So I want to pin that and then sew across there. Oops. Okay, so once we're done with that, we are going to do the 2 flowers. So flowers, hello. Bows. So bow number 1 is slightly less wide. So all we're going to do is flip this in half and then sew one end down here and then over. You want to do the same idea with this end first if you want to make it easy to evert. The reason why we don't do it all the way over for this side because we want to be able to turn it inside out. Bow number 2 is going to be the same idea, but it's just larger. That's it. It's not special. It's just larger. So if we want to build the strap, you want to make a elastic. This is, I believe, 1/2 inch, about the same diameter as your wrist. So I don't know how big your wrist is, so I can't really tell you. Just so it's not too tight, just snug, so you can put it around your wrist when you actually wear it, right? Because a lot of people do that. This is 4 or 5 inches. I'll go measure it later, I think. All right, so safety pin. Another key is have a safety pin or something else that can hold it so it doesn't pop out of the back. I did not get a safety pin when I sat down to do this. I probably should. You're just going to string it through. If you have a better way of doing this, tell me, please. But this is pretty effective with a smooth, small safety pin that will fit inside of the casing. It's actually probably the main reason why people do the big fluffy ones, other than it's somewhat popular to do that, is that it's easier to do the casing through this. So notice here, if I did not have this clip here, it would just come shooting out the end and you'd be all mad and have to redo it. It's not the end of the world, you just got to redo it. It's just a pain because you don't want to do it twice. All right, so good thing I'm still have hold of this. Put these two together. I'm holding on so that they don't go springing into the worst is if both sides get stuck inside the scrunchie, right? So put this together. I am just going to sew it this way because that's easier. So here's the nitty gritty on getting this closed up. I've sewn this together. I double stitched twice just to make sure it doesn't come out. Tucking that in, and then one of these will not just naturally go into the other one. So tuck that in. And then carefully tuck in about 1/2 inch, 1/4 inch, 1/2 inch, whatever seems reasonable to you, right? So that the raw edges aren't sticking out. You don't want it to fray. All right, and then go ahead and stitch down here. Ribbon B, because ribbon A we already flipped inside out and then tucked the 2 ends in and stitched them. So ribbon B, you're going to flip it inside out. This is thick enough that you probably use your hands. You don't need to use the technique with the ribbon. Bow B. Bow number 2. I don't even know what I called it. Bow number 2. Super organized here, you can tell. It's probably good enough that I can just do this by hand. It doesn't take that long. So it might not be worth the slight extra effort for putting the ribbon inside for turning it right side out. Okay, so here, if you have an iron, you can go ahead and iron this. If you want to make it stiff or using flopping material, you might want to have, I should have mentioned this first, iron-on stabilizer before, just in the center. So in this case, we're going to turn these two that way, and notice the seam is here. So here and here, I'm not really concerned about finishing it because we're going to wrap it. But if you really don't want this to start on fraying, go ahead and tuck it in the same way you did for this guy. You can do both sides, of course. Generally, you want the overlap to be in the center. All right, so now we're going to sew down through here, just so it doesn't come apart. So the band part is actually just window dressing, right? That's these guys. So the band, once you've everted it, you can, of course, press it so that the seam is in the back so that you presented with a nice seamless front, and then tuck one side. Don't worry about the other side because that's going to get tucked up when you wrap it. So bow number 2, I almost forgot. This one, the reason why I have both ends is because they're going to be, ish showing. We're just going to fold this in thirds. So it's going to be a bow like this. If you want it to be a bigger bow, which might be a little ridiculous in someone's head, but people like it, you can make it a little bit wider, right? It's up to you. The key here is you want the loops on the end to suggest the bow shape. So this one, you can, of course, also tack it down if you like in the middle. I'm going to do the thirds, so it has body. You can tack it down in the middle if you like, or you can leave it and wrap it really tightly, but I suggest tacking it down. So this is all tacked down. Essentially what's going to happen is this is going to be on that side, the side with the ends. Trim if you like. I do like, so I am trimming. We're going to scrunch this, like approximately so. And then we're going to wrap this around at least once. So this is where you're going to have to do some hand sewing. I'm sorry. It's just, there's no way with this being so tiny. Here, this wrap you can use to wrap around with the finished end, wraps around here to keep it in spot. So actually, what I would do is finish this and then wrap it this way so the finished bottom is covered, and then up and around. And then here, this way, the ribbon sticks up like that. So I'm gonna go ahead and do that. This is of course thicker, probably thicker than you're gonna use. You probably wanna use matching thread, but for the sake of showing, I will use super thick sashiko thread. It does not have to be fancy. It doesn't even have to show through. You can do whip stitches if you like, meaning you do this type of thing where it doesn't go all the way through so it doesn't show. And don't loop it around. That's okay, it's easy to fix. You just want it to be tacked down nicely, right? I don't particularly care because it's just for me, I'm not a huge picky person. If you're making this to sell, please do the whip stitch. This is more effort than a standard one where you have the ends already done, but it is a very different look than everyone else is doing. So I think people will like this a lot. Right? I did just show it to you and it was perfect. It's okay. Like that. And then you're gonna have to hand stitch this in. Hello, you can't see that. Hand stitch that in. So for the flat one, this is a little bit easier because it's already flat. So I sewed it down and then pretend this is already, oh shoot. I just lost the elastic. Joy, I have to redo this. And that's what I was cautioning about. So pretend this elastic's already done. This is the seam, right? We're gonna put this over. And then you can have this. We're tucking this down. And you're gonna come up and over. Should be able to go about twice. You might have to make it a little tight to get to go around twice. And then the underneath you will hand stitch. And there you have a flat bow, which will look like this. It's very cute. I'm going to show you how to make the flower. So I have a hot glue gun, but you can of course use a sturdy glue. I think it's S5000. It's very smelly, so please use a ventilated area. So you want to fold it in half this way. Let me see. I'm going to zoom in. Excuse my reach. You're going to fold it in half and then fold it diagonal this way. Okay. And then what's going to create the flower is you fold one more time. So here, fold these corners in. So it's still a triangle, but when you hold the ends, now you have a flower. I'm going to trim this so it sits nicely, just a little corner, not anything specific. Gosh, I'm not a great crafter. I'm not Martha Stewart. Okay, so in this case, we would hand stitch this into place. You can find, if you want to cover this part up, you can of course find more felt to put in the center, or you can use a sequin or glue a rhinestone in place. It'll work effectively well. It's stitch over where the loop meets and stitch it in place. I'm gonna have to do this again. This is anemic looking. But that's how you do the 3 styles. So here's a slightly more robust and less anemic flower way of making it. It's the same idea. You're gonna fold it lengthwise in half and then towards these ends towards that point. But we're going to do a few things here. Let me make sure I actually get this done. Let me restart that. Put this over, cut the end off as normal. Now here's another key. Is you want to be able to flip this out so that the fluffy part will cover up, or the wide part will cover up this whole circle. So trim off the end just slightly. And then we glue it. and just the ends. So when you put it down before the glue dries, you need to encourage it to be broad because you want it to take up as much space as possible. Okay. So once again, I'm just going to do a quick one for this one because I'm almost running out of time for filming. Half and half again, fold in half. It's quite quick actually. And I am by no means an expert. In Japan, you can actually get certified to do these. And there's a few different folds and color considerations, but this is just for crafting. So don't be like, oh, I make kanzashi. Like in Japan, you have to get certified. So we're going to encourage it to be full. Yes, beautiful, lovely. Before the glue sets, and I'll finish this up. Here's my last little trick. If you want this to be even super fuller, glue the sides of the petals together. Right there. Okay, in frame. Just a little bit. And then do this. Like that. It's kind of cheating because it's not, but you know what? It's not traditional, but that's okay. So you can do a whole bunch and have a whole bouquet for your scrunchie, but keep in mind the more you put in, the harder it's going to be to have a meaningful scrunch, as it were. And then you can put a little something over there if you like to cover it up. And that's it. Just sew it on. So stitch over the the seam here. Stitch over, hand stitch, just catching the felt. And that's it.